Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hi, I'm Derek Van Dyke, editor/co-host/co-producer for Super Deluxe Gamescast, also known as just SDGC, and also for Castle Bravo, a Godzillaverse retrospective. I probably don't need to introduce the concept of Digimon to you. You know, Digimon, digital monsters, some might refer to them as the champions. If you're a 90s kid especially, you grew up right in the trenches of Pokemon versus Digimon, since both had card games and video games and cartoons and vaguely similar premises of adventuring children with weird little monster buddies, all blowing up right around the same time in the US. The funny thing about Pokemon versus Digimon arguments out on the school playground, though, is that a lot of the Western fan base's emotional connections to Digimon are deeply tied to the opinions of a bunch of children who didn't know what came out in what order or what would prove to have a lasting impact on pop culture. I think now, most adult nerds who were there at the time for the Great War understand that before the cartoons that would help define both franchises and before the card games and merchandising empires, Pokemon was already a monolithically popular video game, and Digimon a more niche Tamagotchi-like virtual pet of some notable popularity in Japan. What most people don't know about Digimon is that there is another predecessor, a Digimon video game that predates the cult classic animated series, drawing exclusively from the virtual pets and presenting a vision of the franchise that is both oddly similar and drastically different. For today's Fun and Games side quest, I'd like to talk to you about Digimon World. Released for the original PlayStation, months before the Mamoru Hosoda directed short film that would kick off the animated series, Digimon World is an artifact of its time. Its mechanics and objectives are obtuse, its translation is a mess, and it's buggy as all get out. Its portrayal of many classic Digimon is completely different from the show, little orange jelly bean Patamon, for example, being a humongous butthole, while it omits entirely Digimon we'd have considered mandatory inclusions mere months later. Tentomon is not available as a partner, and Gomamon's whole line is absent from the game entirely. You don't control your partner Digimon, you can't directly teach them new moves, and by the end of a playthrough, you spent a couple of hours of in-game time just hunting for the nearest toilet. It's brutally difficult until you crack the code and the game becomes a cakewalk. But the original Digimon World still fucking rips, and the weird magic of that game has proven almost impossible to recapture. Digimon World is, in some ways, similar in its basic premise to the show that would shortly precede it. The word isekai as a genre descriptor wasn't really popular at the time, but it takes that same premise that the show would of dragging real-world kids into a digital fantasy world that operates on a sort of Alice in Wonderland nonsense logic, and putting them in charge of a little guy. Your character, a kid who is real good at battling their Digimon virtual pets, gets sucked into his virtual pet and then transported into the digital world. Dropped into the remnants of File City, a little old man of a Digimon named Gigimon, that means Grandpa Mon, tells you that the Digimon who used to live in the city have lost their memories, gone wild, and scattered across the island. He hooks you up with your first partner, one of the last remaining residents of the city, and tells you to go find other Digimon, any other Digimon, and get them to return to the city and help rebuild it. Your hero's familiarity with the virtual pet will have to translate into raising and battling real-life Digimon to help rebuild digital society and stop a shadowy threat looming on the horizon. The core of the games carries direct inspiration from the virtual pet. Your job is to raise your Digimon, feed them, train them, praise them, scold them, take them to the gym, take them to the toilet, explore the world, and fight enemy Digimon so that your little guy gets more powerful and evolves and becomes more powerful and evolves, all on a constantly progressing day-night cycle. Digimon don't level up, they just increase their stats based on their training regimen and the enemies they defeat. Your Digimon fights on their own, and the directions you can give them in combat are vague, with Digimon only being capable of hearing more direct commands as they raise their intelligence stat. Digimon also only learn moves by seeing or being hit by a move they're capable of using, with the chances of learning a move also being intelligence-based. The game really leans into the idea that you are not the combatant, you are the combatant's manager, And if that means Digimon Muhammad Ali is wailing on your buddy in the corner of the ring, your job is pretty much to shout helplessly as they get crumpled in real time. You're going to watch your little buddy get crumpled a lot, to be honest, because without training, even the forests just outside File City are tough to explore and survive. Food and restorative items are at a premium. You only heal so much from sleeping, and I may have mentioned, but your Digimon is going to need to both eat and shit. Like, on a really regular basis. And if your little buddy loses in combat 3 times, he dies. Like, dies. And you have to start over with a baby who you have to evolve back up to even the rookie phase. Also, they die if they just get old enough. But it's out into the wilds you must go, because exploring the world is what puts you into encounters with the various Digimon whose side quests, a lot of times just beating them up, will end in them joining the village and offering new services. The city starts as just a bathroom and a meat farm. Meat grows out of the ground on farms, by the way, but recruiting more Digimon gets you things like item banks, shops, restaurants, a hospital, an arena, a bigger meat farm, a cool fountain, and a weird pervert that hangs out next to the open-air toilet so he can watch your friend poop. So you have this weird, indirect monster-raising and monster-battling RPG that also has some city builder elements and a kind of bizarre sense of humor. But the real magic is just how creative and bizarre the process of exploring and recruiting is. This game is so chock full of weird conditions for even seeing certain things that the player never becomes sure of what might be coming next. There are several powerful Digimon who may only appear in an area completely at random. There's a mansion you can only enter if you have a virus-type Digimon partner, an item shop you have to successfully run in order to recruit one Digimon, an area where time crawls to a standstill, a whole island and multiple recruitable Digimon locked behind a fishing minigame, a Digimon you only meet if your Digimon is weak to the cold and falls asleep in an incredibly specific part of the Arctic area. Shit like that. You know how in the pre-internet age we used to have all those urban legends about games? Sonic and Tails being in Smash Bros. Melee, Mew being under the truck in Pokemon Red and Blue, stuff like that. Digimon World feels like the developers made a couple dozen of these and added them to the game preemptively so that they could be real. It's one of the most full of random secrets ass games I've ever played, and it gives the game this sense of being unknowable and infinitely explorable and maybe impossible to see all of. Every corner could be important, it just might not be the right time. You just might not be seeing it from the right angle or have the right item. In a lot of ways, this sort of sensation feels to me like the reason the original Dark Souls took off. Just that same feeling of vast unknowableness that nevertheless it's your job to explore and conquer. There have been plenty of Digimon games since. A couple of them have even been kind of good, but there's something special about how weird the original Digimon World is. They'd keep making Digimon World games, but each one was something unrelated and totally mechanically different. Most of them would be pretty rough. They did eventually make a few direct sequels to the original that maintained its basic concept, Digimon World Redigitize and Digimon World Next Order, but I don't think either quite captures the mystery and vibes of the original, even if they're decent games in their own right. Unfortunately, the original Digimon World was never made available outside the original PlayStation. So it is currently a game lost to time unless you're a collector or a rogue who sails the digital seas. If you get the opportunity to play the original somehow, I do recommend reading a few guides for how to understand the raising and training mechanics and then otherwise going in as ignorant as possible. The magic of this game is in the exploration and the surprise. Thank you for coming with me on this side quest. Happy gaming!
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.